Hi, I'm Craig Damla from Soapbox Rocket, and this is my Founders Live Influencer video, or my continuing series for Founders Live Influencers. And today I want to talk about innovation stories, on how using stories can communicate value to your customers and to your internal team. So let's talk about the basic structure of stories and what stories do. And again, this is a little bit stories 101, but the basics are good. It's good to relearn the basics all the time. And so what do stories do? They inform, they connect, they align, and they define. And yeah, it's that simple, right? Four simple words, four simple definitions, but it's so much more. Story is all of those things combined, and they do it in a meaningful way. You can you inform the value of your innovation or your product through your story, but you also then connect to your client or your team, because you can tell your clients a story about how somebody used your product to solve a problem that they had. They can connect with that because they can say, I can see myself in that. That goes back to my earlier videos on design thinking, where not only can your internal team empathize with somebody when you bring a story back, but your clients can also empathize with other people in their situation. You can align your team. Again, I've talked about this in my design thinking videos, that by having a story and an actual person that we're empathizing with, we can align the whole team. We're not building a new feature. We're building a new feature for our customer, Bob, to make sure that he can get home on time to see his kids every night. It's a good way to align a team. And then defining the problem is in there. It's not just, hey, here's the problem that we need to solve for. It's here's the problem we need to solve for, and this is why it's important we solve for it. So, looking at the basic structure of a story, this is what you want as you tell stories or build stories for your team and for your customers. You want that hook. You're going to start out, it doesn't have to be grabbing them, but you want to grab them and hook them in and then bring them up. You want to follow a whole arc. I need to remember it's this left hand, not right hand. All right. So, start with the hook. Then there's a conflict. This is the problem. This is where you're defining the problem. Then there's the challenge. This is where you've empathized with your client, your customer, whoever, your hero in your story. But now you've taken the conflict and you want to bring it up to a full challenge. This is why they have the conflict in the first place. This is the value that solving the conflict will bring. Think about way back, probably 80s, 90s. FedEx used to run commercials about, when it absolutely has to be there overnight. That was the conflict and the challenge. The challenge was, if I don't get it overnight, I'm going to get fired. The climax is then when he's bringing that envelope, or I'm bringing that envelope to the desk and getting it to FedEx so that they can put it on an airplane and fly it to my boss. And then the resolution is, come down a little bit. You've got the climax. I've gotten it. I've rushed through traffic. I've made it. It's on an airplane. And then your resolution, bring it down a little bit. You've resolved it. Everybody lives happily ever after. But my energy level listening to the story is still up, that I want more. I want to hear more. I want to try your product. So that's it. It puts you into the story. Even the story's not about me. If the story's not about me, it'll put me into the story. I can see myself there. Whereas if you show a graph, can you see yourself in this graph? Can your customer see themselves in this graph? Can your team see themselves in this graph? An analyst might look at this and say, well, there's obviously a story here. Despite all the random noise, red is growing segment over segment. There's a story there, but it's not an individualized story. It's an analyst story. And most of us don't connect with raw data. And And that's actually what the science tells us. The science tells us that when I give you a list of facts, you're going to retain somewhere between 1 and 10%. And that's a huge gap, 1 and 10%. And that's not a lot. You're not going to retain a lot of facts. If we do it in a story, if I give you the same facts in a story, again, the science shows us that you're going to retain about 22 times more than you would have if I just gave you the raw facts. And it's more than that. Sharing stories builds community. And I know, especially for the Founders Live community, this is what Nick talks about, sitting around the proverbial campfire. We don't sit around the campfire and give facts. We sit around the campfire and tell stories. And that's the value of the stories. You're building that community because somebody across the campfire is going to remember that story and they're going to share it with somebody else. So using innovation stories then are those ignition points for connecting with our team and with our clients. And they can be used both tactically and strategically. Tactically, I'm going to tell you a story and about why a client needs our value or our product so much, why it's adding value to their life. And that's going to be that ignition point for you to work on the product to make it better, to make it easier for that person. It's not just a feature you're adding, it's solving a problem for a person. We can also use them strategically to connect to our customers. Again, stories connect us, they align us, and by using it strategically, it's an ignition point of someone saying, you know what, I have had that problem. I understand what the person in that story is going through. I would like to learn more. So first, I want to talk about that's the value of stories and how we can use them. But I want to talk about what actually comes out of them internally first. First, they improve employee retention. And there are studies that back this up, that by having a story, having shared stories, most importantly, we can improve employee retention because the employee feels connected, especially when they're part of building that story. And this is part of the value of stories, is stories live forever. They don't die. They may change, people may change, the details may change, but the overall sentiment of a story doesn't change. The sediment doesn't change either. The base, your base, stays the same and constantly gets reinvented and built on top of it, but that base layer never changes, and that helps improve employee retention. It also drives new product creation. If you have customer-facing employees and they go out and they interact with your customers and they come back internally and they say, okay, they need this, this, and this. Okay, we might add those new features, but if they tell the story of about, I sat with Mary, Mary was having this problem or is having this problem, and she would like our product to do this, somebody might be inspired then, you know what? Doesn't sound like we need new features. It sounds like we need a whole new product. They also reinvigorate teams and companies as a whole. Think about, you have the same thing as an arc. As you come down and you resolve your story, you kind of drop down, and there's a danger of continuing that downward slide. But a story that can connect the team and reinvigorate, all right, and inspire the team, those are there. They can do that. And we do that in lots of ways. If you think about when the team gets down or even after you finish a big sprint, everybody's tired. Everybody's worn down. So you do a team building exercise. You go out and you do something together. And from that, stories come out of that will continue driving the team of, hey, do you remember when we went out to that picnic and the skunks came out of the grass? And it's memories, it's building your team, connecting your team and bringing them back together for the next challenge. And then of course the reason we have stories internally is a lot to help us drive growth and innovation. They drive innovation simply by sharing stories of how customers are using your product or why they're having those problems in the first place, or just gathering problems. So you want to gather those stories. I've said that before in other videos, that don't ask a yes no question when you talk to a customer. Ask them to tell a story. Ask them, you know, how did you find out about us? Or, what was your life like before you had our product? How did you get that document to your boss in another state before FedEx was there? So I want to show you a video here of the value of stories externally, how you can use stories to connect with customers and drive that connection and that trust. So watch this video from Google, and then we'll be back.
Are you ready for your big party today? Huh?
Okay, so you've seen the Dear Sophie video. It's an amazing video. The marketing team did a great job about it. And again, one of Founders Live's key aspects is to be authentic. That felt authentic. I guarantee it wasn't. They don't have the budget to follow somebody from birth to graduation, and they don't have the time. But it does feel authentic, and that authenticity cultivates trust in your community, cultivates trust with your clients. And if you trust a brand, you're going to, one, allow them some slip ups and some mistakes, but you're also going to share stories and the product with other people in your community. So that's going to grow your team's community. It also inspires and motivates. You watch that. How many of you with kids watch that and said, wow, I should have been doing that, and I'm going to start doing that now? Whether it's with Google or with a scrapbook, it doesn't really matter. You've now been inspired, and it's then attracts customers and develops loyalty, because if you're watching that and you weren't using the Google Suite, you're now watching that and saying, I didn't even know I could do that with Gmail. I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go start a Gmail account and start emailing my future self, my kids, my grandkids, about what's going on, and I'm going to pass this down. And that develops the loyalty, because once I'm in there, even if somebody builds a better platform, a better tool, I now have your clients now have to overcome that barrier of, well, how do I move all of this stuff over? So think about that as you are telling these stories, that's how the values are going to connect. So a few ways to practice this, exercise it. One, I mean, first, like I said, ask everybody for stories. Don't ask them what their favorite meal was. Say, tell me about where you had your favorite meal and why it's your favorite meal. So here's a couple of exercises to try. Tell your own stories in 6 words. And this is one of those where constraints can help you focus and help you innovate, is simply by saying, I only have 6 words. I'm almost 40. 6 words over 40 years, or 40 years boiled down into 6 words. Not easy. I didn't do it yet. This is an exercise. I've done it in the past. I'd have to go back and look at my story, and I'm curious how it changed. And that's part of the value. Retell the story, or even tell the story of the last month, the last week, the last year, and redo this exercise to keep practicing being able to make sure you get an arc. And it's not easy to get an arc in 6 words. A second exercise I want you guys to do is don't tell company stories. Find all of your company stories and write sit down in 2 minutes. Do this with a team. It's great with your team. And write down the titles of all of your company stories, as many as you can in 2 minutes. You could do this longer if you want, but 2 minutes, again, that constraint helps you focus. If you say we've got a half hour, we're going to start reminiscing about the stories, and that's great. Do that after the 2 minutes. Get your 2 minutes in there, then start reminiscing and connecting with your team. So that's it. If you're watching this live, or if you're watching it live, I recorded this. Nobody's watching it live. If you're watching this during the Founders Live Q&A, which is going to be June 19th at 12 or 12:30, I'll have it in the details here. Come to founderslive.com and ask the questions. I'll be answering live. If you miss it, you can connect with me on Founders Live. You can connect with me on Twitter at SoapboxRocket, or leave a comment here on YouTube if you're watching it on YouTube, and I'll come back and I'll answer the questions. That's it. Go out and tell your stories. Thanks.